Welcome to BIZTALK' 2022, an interview series organized by the Commerce Society of Royal College, where we have an insightful chat with important business personnel. Our speaker joining us today is not only a leading luminary in the law and legal profession in Sri Lanka, but also a distinguished royalist who made and is continuously making our alma mater shine in the zenith, and he is making it shine really good. So, if we were to talk about him in depth, he is a senior president's counsel, an expert in commercial and business law, intellectual property law, and an expert in solving cross-border commercial disputes. Also, he is recognized as a business leader who has chaired in boards in diverse businesses and industries such as banking and finance, agri and chemical, hotel and leisure, and manufacturing industries, so on and so on. So, he is none other than Mr. Harsha Amarasekara, the chairman of Sampath Bank PLC, CIC Holdings PLC, Swiss Texilon PLC, and holding board positions in many other companies. It's with great pleasure and honor we welcome you to BIZTALK here, sir. Thank you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule to talk with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Fervis, and I'm delighted to be part of the Royal College initiative led by its Commerce Society, particularly being an old royalist. In fact, I was wondering which tie I should be wearing, whether it should be the royal tie or my attire as a lawyer. And since you're interviewing me in my capacity as an attorney, I thought I'll wear my professional attire rather than the royal attire. But delighted to be part of this.
I'm Faris, sir, and I will be your host for this interview. So, Mr. Amarasekara, I would like to take a classic kickstart to this conversation. So, I would like to ask you, as an individual who has proved yourself that you can reach to the top pinnacle of various range of industries, and you have aced in a massive array of industries also. So I would like to ask you, how do you manage to fit into all of these shoes at the same time? And as a classic start, I would ask, what would be a advice you would like to give to young royalists if they are to develop such levels of skills at the same time in the future?
Firstly, I think I need to correct the misconception that I have a wide array of skills. Primarily, I'm a lawyer, and in my 30-odd years of practice, I have concentrated on being a litigator and being as good a lawyer as is possible. So that has been my only focus. The boardroom involvements that I have had over the years have been purely accidental. I have been invited to serve on boards probably because of my legal expertise and because I see the commercial aspect to a legal dispute and the aspect that it can have on a business. And by reason of being invited to a board in the first instance, then some of those board members have seen the contribution I have made on those boards. Then I have got invited to the second board, and then to the third board, and then to the fourth board. So over a period of time, I have also now become fairly a presence in the corporate sector in the sense of being an independent, non-executive director, and in certain companies a chairman. But my primary focus has always been and still remains as a lawyer. So my advice to any royalist, whether it's a royalist or any young man, is concentrate on your core skill. And the more you concentrate on that core skill and the better you become on that, then based on that core skill, you would then be able to spread yourself into other areas based on the expertise you bring into those areas from your core skill. it's not easy to be a jack of all trades. Right.
So, one of the main two agendas of these conversations is going to be, sir, about leadership. So, if I asked you to explain what leadership is, how would you define it, and what is a role of a leader when he's leading a bunch of people?
I think if you read all the leadership books, there are often quotes. In my case, I believe leadership is really a question of being somewhat along the lines of empathy. You have to empower those people around you to be as good or as best as they can be. If I am the chairman of a board, I must bring out the best in my colleagues who serve on the board. And I must be able to understand the skill set that they bring onto the boardroom table, recognize that and value their contribution and encourage that contribution. On the other hand, in respect of the management, I must be able to understand the skill set that they bring onto the boardroom and into the company and into the value creation that they bring in and encourage that. So we all come from diverse backgrounds. Some of them are confident in speaking, some of them are confident in English, some of them are not so confident in English, but they do have a vast domain knowledge in respect of the field that they are in. So it is my duty to instill that confidence in them so that they can properly come and do what they have to do even within the boardroom, whether it's in the context of making a presentation or otherwise, and bring out the best in themselves. The second thing is take decisions. Sometimes taking even a wrong decision is better than not taking a decision. Third thing is the best way from getting from point A to point B is on a straight line. Don't overcomplicate a problem. Think along simple lines.
Yeah.
And common sense usually is the answer to most issues.
So, sir, according to you, so leadership is a skill that is a must to be developed. So, we find you as a great old royalist who proved yourself to be a great leader. Otherwise, once you were, let's say your road to being a chairman was accidental, but other companies invited you because they saw the leadership inside of you. That's why they kept and kept and kept on calling you to be their chairman or to sit in their boards, because they clearly saw what you are capable of. So I would like to ask you, did you have any short and sweet thumb rules, or do you have any tips to give for young leaders that are emerging in this society?
Yes, two things. Basically, be honest to yourself. If you're honest to yourself, then you can be honest in your conduct with others. Don't tell, even in a boardroom, even in a conversation with others, don't always say what is expected of you. Yeah. Say what you think is right. It's not always easy. And it's not I know it sounds a very simple answer, but generally what you inherently first think is what is usually the right answer. And generally the school and your parents would have instilled in you what is right and wrong. And that innate sense of what is right and wrong is in you. Yes, sir. All of us sometimes cross the street without going on the pedestrian crossing. But as we cross the street, we know we are crossing the street in the wrong place. So if we just follow that innate first thought, then generally we will be on the right path.
So, sir, when it comes to leading a group or managing a group rather, one of the most crucial parts of it is communication. And I would say open communication, because it has to be transparent. So when it comes to organizations in our level, in school levels, open communication is not that much of an issue because we are of the same skill level, we are of the same age groups, and we are a narrow array of people. But when it comes to the corporate level, you have to manage with people with a massive spectrum, whether they could be from the simplest person to the most complicated person, from the most well, I would say the most qualified person to the most unqualified person. It's like that. It's a huge spectrum. How do you implement the concept of open communication into the corporate level? How do you make them talk to each other?
So that's a very good question, and I would say that is the core of being a leader.
Yeah.
Being able to permit open communication where the person with no qualification but with a good idea can be heard as loudly as the person with a PhD. And in many of the companies on which I have served as a director, I have seen people with basically sometimes an O-level education, but who has worked in the industry over a period of time, develop such a domain knowledge that they have an intrinsic feel for the business that is absent in that colleague of theirs who might have come with the highest of qualifications. So what is best for that company sometimes is these two people working in tandem, and for them to be able to exchange the ideas and then formulate a plan that can work for the betterment of that company and in fact thereafter for the enterprise as a whole. So that is a sort of a unique skill set that you need to develop as you go along. It's different for it, as a template. It's something that you develop as you go along. But one thing is you need to have control over the meeting. You need to be able to give confidence to any person that if they speak, they are not going to get shut down or be made to feel foolish for making a contribution, whether it be right or wrong. Every contribution that they make must be taken at its face value. They must be made to feel that every contribution is considered as valuable, even if it is not adopted. And that is the role, I think, of a good director. It is certainly the role of a chairman. To be able to facilitate that discussion and to be able to facilitate a environment where making a suggestion, making a proposal is not going to get shut down. That environment must be created.
Yes, sir. So my last question about leadership, this rose in my mind moments ago. So leadership comes in handy with a lot of extra benefits for the person who is trying to be the leader, right? So it's like having an immense amount of focus, courage, the ability to speak in front of people, and so on and so on. So my question is, how much did being a leader affect your personal self? How did it change you? How did it push you to be a better person?
Actually, in two ways. Firstly, on every board on which I have served, whether as an independent director or as non-executive chairman, I have been lucky to have been tasked with other directors who were extremely qualified and well versed in their subject matter. So I have learnt a lot. Over my journey in this corporate spectrum, I have learnt more from my colleagues than I can put down on pen and paper. From each one of them, whether it's in accounting terms from some of my colleagues who are in the accounting profession, others who come from their business spectrums, others who are in marketing, risk management, treasury, whether it's in banking. I mean, the value input that they bring into discussions is itself, it's almost like a university education. if you really want to open yourself out to that. So as a person, I have developed by being able to absorb all of the knowledge that they have brought in to the boardroom. So I am, I suppose, lucky enough to be able to take that outside and apply it in my profession. So when any legal issue comes up before me, I have not only the skill set that I have got through my education of the law, but also the vast array of knowledge that I might have garnered from some of the boardroom discussions and the presentations that have been made, the problems that some of the companies have encountered. So in a all-encompassing word, I would say it has given me a sort of a fairly well-rounded way of looking at the world. Our responsibility towards society, society's responsibility towards government, and government's responsibility towards its people.
So, sir, the next agenda we're going to be talking about is that we are experiencing the most difficult macroeconomic crisis that we have faced ever since the independence in 1948. We are almost down in ruins. So we'll suppose that you are to take action of this current crisis, and what would be your approach or your strategy to getting us out of this really hard situation?
That's a hard question. I think over the last 3-month period, various people have postulated many theories. What I am going to say right now is not going to be very popular amongst many of the quarters. But essentially, we have to come to a situation where we will not have a recurrent budget deficit. A large part of Sri Lanka's economy is what I would call the black economy. The number of taxpayers are minuscule. In large part, the tax revenue comes from the private sector. And whenever the government is short of revenue, they do the easiest of things, which is they increase taxes. And therefore, they go to collecting more from those people who already pay the tax. There must be an increased and very aggressive campaign launched in order to bring the black economy also into the fore. And whether we like it or not, an indirect tax is a necessity. There would of course have to be certain measures taken to exempt some of the essential items away from that indirect taxation so as to ease the burden from those people, from such goods, so as to make the cost of living not too drastic. Secondly, our public sector is bloated. The wages bill that the government pays on a monthly basis is not something that we can afford. The public sector must be made far more efficient, and in fact the government must be in the business of making policy and not be in the business of business. So the public sector must shrink and must shrink significantly if we are to get over it. So revenue must grow up. Expenditure in terms of the public sector expenses must come down, and there must be very clear and cogent policy that does not change every time a government changes, or more importantly, every time a minister within the same government changes. So that there is clarity for investment, there is clarity for policy, and there is clarity in regard to implementation. And then of course we must encourage as much foreign inflow as is possible, and of course sustainable energy, and rely less on borrowings.
Yes. Out of all the theories I've ever heard, that is the most in-depth and the theory that makes the most amount of sense. Thank you so much for that, sir. So, when it comes to the economic crisis that we're facing right now, one of the biggest victims of this crisis is the small and medium scale enterprises. So they are really suffering from this inflation risk and the interest rate risks and as such. So what would be your advice as a ace in this whole I would like to say the industry? What would be your recommendation for them?
It's difficult to give a recommendation actually, Fawaz. For instance, it's a well-known thing that at times of difficulty the big get bigger, right? And that is on the basis that the smaller businesses go out of business. They do not have the same resources. So at a time like this, many of the small businesses don't have access to further funding. Interest rates have gone up. They do not have, if they are an import-based company, they do not have access to dollars. If they are a company based on borrowings, they do not have access to further security to go to banks and ask for more, further facilities. So in a situation such as that, it is imperative that every business understands what their constraints are, plan a little bit in advance, immediately go to your financial advisor or alternatively to your bank, discuss with the relationship manager what your cash flows are, what it has been in the past, what your plans are for the immediate future, and come to an arrangement where you can sort of structure your business to come out of the present hiatus so that you can still be in existence 6 months from now, so that when the situation improves, you're still there to then go forward and come out of the present rut.
Yes. So talking about this whole economic topic, there's another question I should ask you. So after the industrial revolutions, the industries grew immensely, and whether we like to admit it or not, the human beings became a profit-oriented species. We became addicted to making more and more money and growing our net worth more and more, and little did we know, unconsciously we lost the humanity in our hearts, and following that we lost our planet slowly. When the environmental changes, the environmental pollution of resources, and as such. But now we can see, into the 21st century, we can see that the economic trends of the world have changed more into a way that where we are trying to find ourselves once again. We are trying to find ourselves in this planet, and we are trying to get back together, and we are moving forward with a triple bottom line concept, I would like to call it: profit, people, and the planet. Do you actually think that the Sri Lankan corporations are also working according to the triple bottom line concept, or do you think we have to re-strategize it to go along with the trends of the world, or are we still on that mentality we were in during the Industrial Revolution? What is your perspective on that? I would like to know.
No, I think many of the Sri Lankan corporates do embrace it.
Yes.
And many of them have. In fact, many of the corporate annual reports have a chapter on sustainability. The question I have is, how many of them are actually doing it for the sake of having that sustainability chapter because it is expected? And how many of them are actually doing it because it is a mission for them? It is part of their vision. How much of it, how many of them are doing it because it is part of their DNA? There are corporates, some of the apparel companies, they have been at the very forefront of this. They've been visionaries in the context of how much they wanted to be green, so to say. And there are many corporates here who have been doing it. Some are paying lip service to it. Others are doing it because they feel it is part of their DNA. But it does not matter whether you are only doing lip service or otherwise, something is being done.
Yes.
And it is therefore moving in that direction. There are also lots of work that is being done in this regard where corporates are not really espousing it in the media as much as some others are. And that is encouraging because I think it must be done for the sake of the environment and sustainability and the planet rather than proclaiming it outside for the purposes of advertisements. Certainly there's much more that can be done. Certainly much more that needs to be done, but it is very much a facet of Sri Lankan private sector corporate life.
Yes, sir. So we have one more question for you, but before that, I would like to ask you a question that I personally ask whenever I meet important personnels, and I have this journal where I write the answers down and I compare them. So I think with this conversation, I think all of our viewers deserve to know this. So the question is quite a peculiar one. If you could go back in time and meet your younger self at a certain time period of your life, what is the one thing that you would tell him to do or to not to do?
That's an interesting question, and I probably need to reflect a little bit on that. I might probably tell myself that I should have listened to my parents a little bit more. Many of the things I did, for instance, I did because I was initially persuaded by my parents. For instance, I was an AFSer. I went on AFS. I initially didn't want to go, but my father was the driving force behind me applying for it, and I must say it changed my life. Most of what I am today is also partly because of that AFS experience. My mother tried her very best to get me to learn some musical instrument. I resisted. We went for classes, but I resisted. Ever since I was in my 20s, I have wished that I could play either the piano or the guitar. Right? And to this day, I wish I was able to play either the piano, the guitar, or something. So while I did listen to them 80-85% of the time, there were those little aspects of things that probably I didn't. So that, to that extent,
listening to your parents a little more, I'll note that down. So to wrap this up, sir, finally, being a distinguished royalist and as a role model for most of us, what is your advice for the young royalists or any young man out there?
I think have a fairly complete life. I was not studious. I was a very ordinary royalist, I would say. I don't think anybody in Royal thought I was cut out for anything exceptional. I was a pretty ordinary royalist. I enjoyed being a royalist. I am still very much a part of the royal spectrum amongst my colleagues. I spend a lot of time with my friends who are all royalists. I enjoy the company of all royalists. I think what is important is for us to understand the value system that the school instills in us, to carry that value systems outside, and to be true to ourselves and work within the domain that we can and be proud of what we do. And it need not be at one spectrum or another. Whatever it is that we do, we must do as best we can and be proud of what we have done. And I think if you do that, we would be a true royalist.
thank you so much for your valuable words and your lessons and your insightful aspects on our questions towards you, sir. This interview made our project a massive success. I wish you all the very best for all your visions, missions and your work that is for your future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Furvis. Thank you. Delighted to be part of this. Thank you very much.